So we are live now. Snehadi, we're live now.
Okay. A very good evening to one and all. Gokhale Memorial Girls College, Department of English, welcomes you to yet another lecture, which is part of a year-long lecture. This is the third one of the series. And today the lecture will be delivered by Professor Ritu Chaudhuri. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you.
Like to introduce ma'am to everyone who's listening. Professor Ritu Chaudhuri is a professor and the director of Center for Comparative Social Theory, Department of Sociology, West Bengal State University. Her areas of interest and publication include sociological and feminist theories, gender and sexuality, posthumanism, B.R. Ambedkar's writings, caste and feminism, women's writings, women's movement, interfaces of sociology, literature, and films. She has recently edited a volume in Bangla entitled Naribade Nanapod, published by Ananda Publishers. Today she will be delivering the lecture on the topic Few Questions Concerning Women's Autobiography. Ma'am, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm thankful to the Department of English, Gokhale Memorial Girls College. So yeah, it's a great honor. And so they have already said that I would be talking on women's autobiography. And let me tell you at the very outset that today I would not talk about any particular autobiography. What I'll do is I would rather talk about a specific feminist perspective, or so to say, about certain theoretical and methodological tools of reading an autobiography, a feminist methodology of reading autobiography. And to specify, I would be dealing with a post-structural feminist understanding of autobiography. And basically, what we are going to do is we'll think in terms of how we are going to read women's autobiographies. So there are three basic concepts here I would be dealing with. One is woman, because we'll be talking about women's autobiography. Second, of course, autobiography. And third, I would like to talk a little on the feminist implications of women's autobiography. So there would be three basic sections in this lecture. So I'll begin with the word or concept woman. So so woman is not just a word, it's a concept. And it's interesting that if you look into its etymology, you'll find that it's a very old English like expression, which is basically, which means wife of a man, wifmon. It's an old English expression, wifmon, that there lies the etymology of the word woman, and it means wife of a man. So actually looking into etymologies of words, one comes across the long-standing social histories, associated usages, customs, norms that tend to cling to the words. And so it's interesting that woman, here we can see that in the very specific concept or word, even in the word, we can see that woman is being expressed in a relational notion. So in relation to, woman is identified in relation to man as the wife of a man. So so wife of a man is the woman. And actually we see that this man woman divide actually it works from within a structure which we call sex gender system, which organizes the everyday living of individuals, families, communities, societies, whatever. And it works as a principle for allocation of duties, rights, rewards, and power, including means of violence. And this structure of sex gender system, this actually goes against women in favor of man, or in favor of men. And Gail Rubin would say that, women are being oppressed as women by having to be women. So I'll just mainly I would just talk about three overlapping forms of sex gender discrimination, and I consider that this lecture is for the undergraduate students, and so I'll just begin from the very first principle of things, and I'll just move on a little, beginning with the very initial basic principles of the whole thing I would be talking about. So let me talk a little on the sex gender system, and here I would say that there are three overlapping forms of sex gender system, overlapping, because you'll see that that these forms of sex gender system, forms of manifestations of sex gender discrimination, man woman discrimination, are manifested in several ways, and here we will be just talking about three overlapping forms. One is first, which is sexism, which is prejudice or discrimination which is based on a person's sex, sexual identity, and it includes some kind of an overt social behavior at the level of speech and action, right? So this is what is sexism. And then the second mode of discrimination between man and woman, mode of manifestation of discrimination between man and woman would be patriarchy. So patriarchy is a social system where men are the primary authority, and they hold the control over social organizations, property, and they occupy the roles of political, moral, religious leadership. So this is what patriarchy is, and it is as you all know, it's the rule of the father, and kind of men holding authority over women, children, and family. And sometimes it also comes in terms of patrilineal, because the lineage is always in terms of the father, and in the line of the father rather. So and the property, title are being inherited as per the male lineage. So while sexism is overt social behavior at the level of speech and action, patriarchy is oppression of women at the institutional level, right? And third, we come to talk about androcentrism or phallocentrism. Andro, which is men, and phallocentrism. Here, phallus is the signifier, which it's the primary signifier, which tends to signify all other signs. It provides meaning to all other signs. So phallus is the transcendental signifier, and phallocentrism or androcentrism is the aware or unaware kind of practice of accepting the masculine point of view as dominant and authentic. So phallocentrism reflects the ways in which patriarchal systems of representation constantly reduce women to a relation of dependence on men. So in this system, as I've already said, phallus acts as the symbol of signification, as the primary symbol of signification, the sign that gives meaning to all other signs. And so Sexism is, I repeat, sexism is oppression or discrimination against women at the level of overt social behavior, patriarchy at the institutional level, and androcentrism or phallocentrism involves discrimination against women at the level of conceptual level. Now, androcentrism works at two levels. First and foremost is the notion of misogyny, which is a cultural attitude of hatred against women because they are women, right? And it is, misogyny works as an ideology or system of beliefs that goes beyond, goes along with patriarchy for several years and continues to place women in inferior positions with restricted entry to power and decision making. Misogyny is manifested in many different ways, from jokes to pornography, from violence to self contempt. Women are often taught to feel towards themselves and their own bodies. And so misogyny works as a dominant ideology, and it is being shared both by men and women. And second, uh, androcentrism also includes like consideration of man as the uh, consideration of man as the role, as the universal model, of human. So when we come to write the word human, the man, I mean human, here M appears in capital. I mean, it doesn't appear, but it works that way. It's always in the model of man. So we can see that this man-woman distinction is similar to a number of other distinctions that are often treated as paired terms or binaries, right? Uh, for example, nature, culture, private, public, reason, emotion, uh, humanities, sciences, immature, matured, infant, adult, ignorant, enlightened, body, mind, victimized, empowered, good, bad, and so on. One can keep on increasing the list of binaries. Um, and we can see that most often the second of each pair. So for this matter, nature, culture, private, public, masculine, feminine, masculine, emotion, reason. Here, the masculine, reason, science, matured. So the second of each pair appears or is considered to be more superior or powerful or more developed than the first in the pair. So such dichotomies work to maintain the domination uh, of the hegemonizer over the hegemonized. So and this gets this whole notion of discrimination of gender gets reflected in the society through language, and we interact, communicate with each other through language, and this whole question of discriminations remain implicated in language, in our use of language. Like uh, we can uh, we can think of some proverbs uh, like in English, a bad woman is worse than a man who has a fair wife needs more than two eyes, and women are made of glass, women are made to weep. So there are several proverbs, and I mean, this is an example of how language works. I mean, uh, uh, to reproduce the question of discrimination of gender, and how the whole question of whole notion of discrimination of gender is implicated in language. Like also there are several nursery rhymes and poems where you can see that how this the gender norms are being are being taught to little children in through their socialization. And in Bangla, we learn the alphabets like O, A, O, Bhat, Ano, Borobo. So this talks about, I mean, whenever a little child, as soon as he or she learns the alphabets, along with the alphabet, he or she learns that Borobo has a specific role in the family, that she would, she bhat anbe. She would provide with food, and she does the domestic chores. Now, so this is a very quick look into the word or the concept woman and its implications. Now let us move into autobiography. Now, what is an autobiography? It's very simple. We all know that autobiography is a personal account of one's own life. Especially, it's an account which has been published. It is also known as memoirs, life writing, and it is a literary form. And so, autobiography is a reflective act of it's an act of reflexive writing. Like reflexive, why? Because it's an act of looking back at oneself, when you yourself are the object of your vision. So you look at yourself, you write about your own life, right? So this is something, a reflexive mode of writing, where you look back at yourself, and when you yourself are the object of your vision, of your understanding. So the self, and what is a self? Again, so self is a relatively stable set of perceptions of who we are, and in relation to ourselves, to others, and to the social system. The self is socially constructed, and in the sense that it is shaped through interaction with other people. And it is the written representation of oneself about. Autobiography is the written representation of oneself about his or her past selves. So now here I'll pose a question, like, do we really have something called a past self waiting to be retrieved? Now, is it an archaeological work of excavation? Like, you dig out and get to see yourself, like lying out there. You wipe off the dust. You sharpen the edges. In that, is that what we call autobiography? I pose my questions again. So, do we really have something called a past selves, which awaits retrieval? Which is waiting to be retrieved. So is it really an archaeological work of excavation, that you dig out your own self and you get to see that yourself is lying out there? Is it a work of excavation, or is it constructed, or is it a work of writing? So yes, it is a work of writing, of course. Now, I have said earlier that at the very outset that I would be talking about autobiography, and we would here be considering a feminist lens, a post-structuralist feminist lens. And let me talk about Sidney Smith, who, in a very way back in 1998, wrote an article and observed that the I of the autobiography's narrator and the I of the subject of the text are not the same. So here she is actually making a distinction between the written self and the writing self. The I who is writing the autobiography. So I am writing about my own life. So while I'm writing, my writing self, and in this writing, I produce a self which is being written, right? So Smith would say that there is no essential, original, coherent autobiographical self before the moment of self-narrating, right? Nor is the self of an interiority, nor is there something like self, which is, self or interiority, that is somehow ontologically a whole, that is seamless, which is true, a real self, something like that. The interiority of self, that is said to be prior to the autobiographical expression, is an effect of the autobiographical storytelling. That's what she hints at. So the while we are writing an autobiography, there is an effect that as if there is a self, and I'm going to and I'm what I'm doing is I'm writing my writing on my past self, right? So as if the written self is always already there. So this is an effect. Smith would say that this is not there is no real kind of a self that is quote unquote that is really there, but we are that reality is just an effect of the autobiographical storytelling, and that there lies the specificity of autobiography. So the autobiographical self is not, the manifestation of an authentic self. What is sought in autobiography by both the writer and the reader is not a pre-existent, preformed self, but one which is written into existence. So Smith would say that autobiography is a written performance, a performance which produces the written self and also the writing self. This is simple. Like, how do you think we write an autobiography? You look into your past, your life, and this looking back is mediated by your present self, your experiences, your ideologies, your values, and this present self actually help you derive meaning from what you did or what has happened to you in the past. So you present so your present self helps you remember what you remember, and it helps you forget what you forget. So the present self constitutes the past self, and also the other way around. The past self constitutes or helps constructing the present. And again, autobiography is not an archaeological work of digging out an old self. It's a performance. And in this performance, we can see that both the writing self and the written self, which are mutually constitutive, like the writing self produces the written self, and also the written self produces the writing self. And this is a kind of a performance, and that there lies the specificity of the genre that we called autobiography. And again, the specificity of autobiography is not the truth claim per se, because if I write about my life, one may say that you know the truth about your life, so so what you say is true, right? But then the specificity of autobiography is not actually the claim to truth. Rather, it is important how the claim is being made, because how I construct the claim that what I say about myself is true, right? Because truth here, you'll see that it's very relative, and the truth that you think you are constructing, I mean the truth which you think that the truth about your life is mediated by your kind of present understanding, present experiences, and your present self. So what is important in autobiography is the gesture of the claim to truth, and rather the work of the gesture that marks the specificity of autobiography. It's not the mere truth claim which is the specificity of autobiography. So the work of writing, as I've already said, produces both the selves, both the written the selves, one being written and the other which happens to write. So the work of autobiography produces both the selves, and the writing self looks at her reflection in the written self. The written self in turn forms the selves that writes. So both the selves constitutes each other through mutual reflexive substitution. Now, actually, all forms of writing, even in fictive, incongruous writings, even in fictions, you'll see that those writings also generate such an autobiographical moment. This is a moment of specularity. It's just like a mirror, the state of resembling a mirror. You look at yourself. So in most cases, in most of the writings, you'll see that this sort of moments arise where you actually look at yourself, you look back upon yourself, and just like as you look at yourself, look at the image of yourself and in the mirror. And this moment of specularity and alignment between two selves involve the writing self and the written self. And the specificity of autobiography is that in autobiography, these two selves appear the same. The writing self and the written self, they appear the same, right? Now I move on to the third section, which will be a longer section. I mean, to the feminist. What should I say? Feminist understanding of autobiography. Now, we have seen that ideally autobiography has to be written by men, right? The secure, universal, human male self, considered as the ideal autobiographer. And the classical confessional mode of autobiographies were largely written by public male figures like, as you have read, Augustine, Rousseau. So also autobiographical theories were also primarily concerned about, men's life writing. When you come to think of autobiographical theories, then also you'll see that they were dealing with classical autobiographical theories were dealing with men's life writing. So I've said that who is the ideal autobiographer? Who is the ideal person who can write an autobiography? The secure male self. The man who has a secure self. And now, what do you think this phrase secure male self means? So the specificity of masculinity or masculine self is that it appears to be well defined, as if in its own terms, well contoured, confident in its interaction with individuals or groups in the society. So as if the masculine self has it's secured enough, it is well defined, and it has what should I say, it is well contoured, and it is confident in terms of how to interact with other individuals or group in the society, and as if and this definition of the masculine self appears that as if it is in its own terms, unlike the self of women. Now, this does not mean that male self is secure in the real sense of term. This is not some kind of a reality I'm talking about. I'm only talking about the construction of masculinity or masculine subjectivity, in which and in where it appears that that male self are well defined as if in its own terms, and women self, on the contrary, are inchoate, underdeveloped, as if it cannot be defined in its own terms. Women they are more I mean, they are caught up in the social. They are known in terms of their social roles, be the role of a wife, mother, daughter, whatever. And as if women's self is not defined in their own terms. It's always in relation to others. And uh, and the making of the masculine self requires the repudiation of everything feminine, you know. So uh, let me repeat let me reiterate the point that here I'm not talking about real men and women. I'm just talking about the construct. I'm just talking about a stereotype of the man woman binary or distinction. And so this does not always have much to do with empirical men and women. There are feminine men and masculine women as well. So it's not about that. It's about the stereotype. It's about the structure. Uh, and it is the structure of society. It's the structure of language as well. And, but then one must remember that a masculine woman would not be as ridiculed as a feminine man or an effeminate man would be, right? So in human societies, femininity is considered as an aberration of humanity, like aberration of human virtues, like, virility, rationality, courage, strength, passion, whatever, articulation, autonomy. And the woman stands in opposition to these human uh, qualities, human virtues. Women stand passive, wobbly, hesitant, weak, indolent, meek, dependent. So and so this is how the structure works. And so autobiography as a canonical genre in the West, with its celebration of the grand narrative of the sovereign self or secure self, is generally written by men. Women are generally excluded from the public realm of writing. And now, until mid 70s, little work was done on women's autobiographies, and despite many attempts to generalize about women's autobiography, we could see that there were differences of caste, class, race, sexuality, and nationality, which precludes, finding some common denominators of women's autobiography. It's really difficult uh, to think of the characteristic features of women's autobiography, because women themselves, women is, woman is not a unit. Women are not a, unified group. They are different in terms of caste, class, sexual orientation, and several other things. So on the one hand, women's autobiography is conceptualized as a form of emancipation. So when a woman is writing, a woman who is generally being excluded from the realm of writing, realm of the public. Again, this is the structure. I'm talking about the structure. I'm not talking about the real women, or I'm not talking about the empirical women as such. So on one hand, we can see that autobiography is conceptualized as a form of emancipation, or a way to develop or to give voice to one's life, to narrate on the basis of something like self authorization. So I hold the authority to write about my own life. So this is some kind of an empowerment, or yes, it's an empowerment. You are empowered, to write upon yourself, write about your own life. So on the one hand, if a woman is writing about herself, this is a kind of conceptual, this is the whole the act of writing on oneself is a form of emancipation. And on the other hand, now there is a recognition of a deliberate self discipline, an attempt to conform to the literary and cultural norms so as to be publicly recognized. So there is a standard literary norm, there is a standard mode of, I mean, there's not one, but there are several standards of, writing an autobiography, writing as such. So the norm of writing. So when a woman is writing on her about her own life, or writing anything that she wants to write, she has to conform to the literary and cultural norms which are in order to get recognized publicly. So when a woman is writing, uh, and when a woman is writing writing into the language of the dominant, what she's uh, what she's actually she's I mean, the specificity of women's writing is getting in the whole process, the specificity of women's writing is getting obliterated. So what I do is, I when I write, I abide by the norms of the dominant. And while I'm while I'm conforming to the dominant literary norms, I lose my specificity. I um, I lose my specificity. So feminist theories acknowledges the significance of this tension in women's autobiography. So autobiography enables one to understand the process of subject formation and the work of politics of sexual difference in such process. So it's a very complex process. Like, yes, when you are someone who has been excluded from the realm of writing. You being a woman, you are being excluded from the public realm of writing. Now you come to write. When you come to write, you actually conform to the language of the dominant. You write as per the following the norms, rules, methods of writing, of writing, of mainstream writing. So in the process, what you do, what you lose is your specificity. So actually, this is a problem which has been, this has been underscored by the feminist theorists who are working on autobiographical writings. Now, autobiography basically involves a very close account of your everyday living, including narration of the personal domain. And when you talk about the personal, when a woman talks about the personal, it opens up several troubling questions, right? So the patriarchal ideologies generally always tag the realm of the personal with the woman. And the realm of the personal, which is being tagged by the woman, is a realm which should not be talked about, right? So you can talk on uh, on the public, at the level of the public, on public issues, but you should not talk on private issues. On the one hand, we can see that, yes, and then you tag woman with the realm of the with the realm of the personal. So when woman comes to write, she writes about the personal. And the assumption that the personal is an individual concern generally conceals the reality of women's systemic oppressions, because generally we can see that the level of personal masks, or it hides how patriarchy is exercised and reinforced through the personalized spaces like that of love, marriage, child rearing and childbearing, sexual practices from rape through prostitution to consenting sexual intercourse. And so women's oppression springs from the control of their personal spaces. So, as the second wave feminist and the radical feminist pointed out, like if you are talking about women's oppression, you have to think of the level of the private. You have, because that is the root cause of oppression. There lies the root cause of oppression of women, and the root cause is sexual control, and that is the and that happens in the realm of the private. And so women's oppression springs from the control of their personal spaces, their sexualities, their reproduction, in terms of mandatory, sometimes in terms of mandatory motherhood, sometimes in terms of compulsory heterosexualities. Now, the feminists would say that the personal issues have structural causes and therefore need to be addressed in political terms and not on an individual basis. They would say that the personal is political. And this is a slogan of the second wave feminists, that the personal is political. Now, if you are doing feminist politics, then you must understand that the personal is not merely, is not something to be hidden. It's not something which should not be talked about. You have to talk about your public realm. And in this autobiography, is bears the possibility of making the personal political, making the personal public. So autobiography, sorry, it is, yeah, let me place the camera here, it's better. So autobiography makes public the realm of the personal, and it bears immense political possibilities. And to think of the potential of women's autobiography, one needs to think of its specificity, of its particularities. Now, let me talk about a few points. Let me raise a few points rather. So, women's writing structurally implies a resistance to phallocentrism. The very notion of resistance is complicated, and it could be thought in several ways. Now, writing itself gets displaced when someone who cannot write, or cannot write in the sense who had been excluded from the realm of writing, be it a woman or any marginal identity. So as to say, this would also be the specificity of a Dalit autobiography, because when a Dalit man or a woman, Dalit woman who is in that sense, who is doubly displaced from the mainstream for being woman on the one hand, and for being Dalit on the other. So when a person who is actually being excluded from the realm of writing, from the public realm of writing, begins to write, so this very act of writing will mark a kind of displacement of the dominant, and this is essentially linked to the essentially linked to some kind of a subversion, because uh, when you are writing something, and when a person who has been excluded uh, from the um, from the realm of writing, when a man or a woman remaining at the marginal position comes to write, that very act of writing is will mark some kind of a displacement, right? So, and again, women's writing is not a possibility which is confined to female writer. I have just mentioned about Dalit autobiographies and Dalit writings, and you'll see that women's writing is just a concept, right? Concept of maybe subversive writing. I mean, the French feminists would say that they would place a creature feminine as of the women's writing in that subversive possibility. They would relate women's writing with that subversive possibilities, because women's writing bears the possibility of questioning the dominant which has erstwhile, which has not allowed someone to write. When I mean, that act of writing itself is a mark of resistance. So, writing here is a possibility which is not confined to female writers. I mean, empirical female writers, women's writing is not something which is related, which can be limited to, which remains limited to uh, writers who are empirically, who are female. It can as well be employed by male authors. And a mark of displacement can at best be contingently related to the act of writing by a woman. Again, whenever one marks a writing as woman's writing, one finds a place for her in the existing semiotic system. So, whenever one labels her in as subversive, uh, basically she fails to subvert, because w- uh, I mean, at the same point, it's subversive and it is not subversive, because whenever you are writing in the language of the dominant, whenever you come to you are sharing the ideology of the dominant, you stop or you fail to subvert, and you become a part of that system. So that is a paradox that is that is related, uh, or I mean, that is a paradox of writing actually. So that is there. But then I'm not going into such things, such details, or such complicated moments of feminism. I would just very quickly, if I have to talk about, if I'm talking for an hour, so maybe I have 10-12 minutes more. Am I right, Shubham? So yeah,
Yes, of
I
course.
think,
You can take.
mm, yeah. So I would just, I think the undergraduate, in our undergraduate syllabus, we have Amar Jibon, mm, which is a full-length
Yes, yes, absolutely.
autobiography of a Bengali woman,
Yes.
um, Rasha Sundari Devi.
Rashundari.
Uh, so you have Rasha Sundari's Amar Jibon in the
Yes,
syllabus.
we have as part of fifth
Yeah.
semester.
Okay.
We
I'll just quickly mention a few things about on that. Is that okay?
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So, so Rashasundari Devi's Amar Jibon is, Rashasundari Devi was an unknown housewife with no pretension to public persona, and it's just a fascinating text. You'll find that the text is fascinating, and it's written by actually the a full length Bangla autobiography. The first full length Bangla autobiography is written by a woman called Rashasundari. So I would not actually today I would not talk about Rashasundari's Amar Jivan. I'll just mention something else, like uh, while uh, while theorizing uh, a mode of difference between men and women writing in Bangla, Partha Chatterjee um, said, I mean, Partha Chatterjee has distinguished, the autobiographies of man and woman as Sriti Katha and Attocharit. He would say that, and that men would write Attochorit, which is a literal translation, I mean, of autobiography, Attochorit, and which retaining the idea of the classical medieval chorit, as the life of illustrious men. And Sriti Katha, on the other hand, relates to memoirs, stories from memory. And this dichotomy, as theorized by Partha Chatterjee, is not simply that women's life stories are concerned more with the domestic than the public life, a feature often noticed in women's autobiographies of the modern periods in all countries. The difference lies in the textual strategies. Partha Chatterjee would say that it's not that women are always writing about their, domestic, uh, about their home, their domesticity. It's not that. The point is that the textual strategy of men and women are different. And on the basis of that textual strategy, he is distinguishing between Attochorit. He makes a distinction between Attochorit and Sriti Katha. According to Chatterjee, what distinguishes Sriti Katha from Attochorit is a distinct literary genre, and that it is not the life history of the narrator or the development of herself, but rather the social history of the times. Chatterjee would say that when someone is writing a Sriti Katha, when a woman is writing a Sriti Katha, her textual strategies would, would be a narration of the um, of the you know of the social history of how his her life, how her everyday is related, is implicated in the everyday social. And uh, on the other hand, you will see that when men are writing on autobiography, then they are concentrating more on the self. As I've already said that I was referring to the secure male self. Here we'll see that actually Partha Chatterjee follows that uh, kind of distinction between men and women. And here he separates the two modes of autobiography, presupposing a secure male self at the one end, and the inchoate woman self, the woman who is not very sure about her kind of self, and as if the self of the woman is implicated into so many other things around her, and as if she's not very sure about her kind of understanding of herself. So, and that self is the inchoate self is dissolved in the everyday social, unlike the man self, who appears, unlike the masculine self, which appears to be extremely well defined, as if in its own terms. And we we see we come to see that when we read when we read Amar Jibon, we come to see that this binary or this distinction is hardly tenable. Like when you are reading Amar Jibon, you will see that uh, that Amar Jibon works beyond this Attochorit Sriti Katha distinction, and the textual strategies that this woman, who is an unknown housewife, that the textual strategies that she is taking up is much like Attochorit. And in spite of the fact that she's she's implicated, herself is implicated in the everyday social, in her family, and in her surroundings, still it is not dissolved into that. It remains uh, it 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 doesn't get dissolved into that everydayness. And there are several moments in this autobiography where we can see that her abstruse understanding of life through bhakti, and so that does not bear an that does not bear any gendered kind of language or gendered kind of textual strategies, which which generally are tagged, to the writing of women. Um, so the act of writing itself, she's writing herself in radically new ways. And yet a woman's writing is far too easily related to the cultural world, I mean, from which she is coming. And Rasha Sundari's like life writing um works against the generalized view of women's autobiography as being bound to the intimate sphere, gore. And Sundari paradoxically, uh, gets implicated in the construction of the modern individual subject, not as not as the other, not as the woman, but as the self, like as if she is writing the Atmacharit. And Tonika Sarkar points out that Rasha Sundari viewed Sangsar and Maya and always tried to come out of his edifice. And the reconstruction of her religious practice is non-feminine, more individualistic, and more, personal in nature. So, mm, so I think I'll just stop here, and uh, I'll end just saying maybe one or two lines that. mm, I mean, we have always tried to to label women's writing, to tag women's writing, to label women's writing, um, and we have always tried to uh, distinguish women's writing, differentiate women's writing from mainstream writing. And that is how the structure of genre works. But then, as I was mentioning earlier, that individual women, empirically, if you come to see that how women actually write, then you will see that they have always gone beyond these stereotypes, and they have always gone beyond all these labels. So yes, I think I'll stop here, and uh, maybe we can receive some questions.
That was a very enlightening session. Ma'am, there are questions in the comments. Ma'am, are they visible to you? I think ma'am has either left the meeting or something. Yeah.
No, I'm there.
Oh, okay. Ma'am, there are questions appearing on the screen. Maybe you can go ahead and answer them.
So I can read one question. I want to know that does male chauvinism and phallocentrism are conceptually same? Yes, chauvinism uh, is basically uh, yes, that is a that actually is a part of misogyny, because um, you are being you're being gentle, you're being chauvinistic, you're being gentle towards women, and it all works from the point that women are not at par. So women are not. So how do you relate, how do you engage with someone um, who is not equivalent to you, right? So you are being generous, and sometimes you're being benevolent. So this is how you deal with the other, someone who is not at par, someone who is not um, not uh, you know not someone who is inferior to you, someone who is less powerful, right?
Ma'am, there is another question in the comments by Shampurna Chaudhuri that, ma'am, if we sketch Amar Jeevan by Rosha Sundari Devi and My Story and Life as an Actress by Binodini, can we sketch any similarity between the two, except both are women, as one is confined to home and one works out, or is a working woman? I think that is what she wants to say.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just read this out. Yeah. Can we? Yeah. So um yes, there is a similarity. I mean, it's I mean, but the point is that um, I mean, uh, when you think of Binodini's life writing, and she actually talks about her experiences of being an actress, so who creates a new space for herself, um, creates a new space for a woman in the field of in the field of in the stage, in the field of stage acting. And uh, her kind of her kind of what should I say, mm, uh, her kind of experiences is so very different from the experience of Rashasundari Devi, who is just a unlike Binodini, who is a public figure. She was not. She was just a housewife. She was, you know, she always remained within the household. But then the point is that. In spite of the fact that she remained within the household, it didn't hinder her to talk about the you know to talk about things which are extremely way beyond her domesticity. And Binodini's so that is that in and that way she subverses the kind of understanding of women's autobiography as such. I mean, the mainstream understanding of women's autobiography. And on the other hand, we can see that Binodini Dashi, she also, in a very strong sense, she is also subverting the mainstream ideology, which always excludes a woman, and on top of that, she is a woman who is not a chaste woman, right? She is, in certain senses, she is doubly displaced from from the mainstream, because because she's a woman on the one hand, on the other hand, she's a public woman. And so when she writes on her about her experiences, that in several senses, that is, of course, that is also subversive. So in both Brashasundari and Vinodini, we can see that they are subverting the norms of patriarchal norms of writing, uh, right? So maybe that way we can we can think of some sort of a parallel between these two autobiographies.
I guess there is
Okay,
a
there is
question
another question. Yeah,
from
let
Oritra
me read it
Dash.
out. Right. So, is there a particular way to approach reading autobiographical essays that you would suggest to gain an understanding of the writing self as opposed to or in juxtaposition with the written self? Um, I actually don't get your question. If I've got your question right, I mean, I have been talking about that. I mean, I've been talking about the methodology of how to think of, how to understand the tension or the negotiation between the writing self and the written self. Because this is a point which is to be underscored, because the fact that we do not generally we come to when we write autobiography, we think that the writing self and the written self is the same, right? And we do not realize the constructed nature of both the writing and written self. We this is a uh, we don't understand that we don't take into consideration the fact that the very act of writing actually helps constructing both the selves, writing self and written self. So that is the methodology I had been talking about. So that's it.
Thank you, ma'am. Can we take one or two more questions? There is
Yeah,
another
sure.
question. Yeah, from
Mm.
the department. Can it be made visible on the screen, please?
Snehadip, would you please read out the
Authorial,
question?
yeah, authorial position in the intersectional. So I've just started to read the other question. Can you show
Uh,
that to
I,
me?
I guess it's a continuation of the same question. The questions are appearing in two parts.
Okay. It, yeah. So the first, let me see the first part. In this context, it reminds me of Rabindranath offers a different notion of life writing in Divantriti, where it is demonstrated loosely drawn series of visuals. My question to you, ma'am, how the next part, authorial position in intersectional points, Casca's Timber influences the contour of the self-mediated through a life writing. So, uh, this is, this is a. Can you just reframe your question? Maybe.
Uh, Snehadi, could you just read it out once more? The entire
No,
question.
she's asking you to reframe your question. Shubham, if it is your question, you can maybe reframe it a bit and then ask now.
Actually, the question is in the YouTube chat box of our Gokul Memorial Girls College.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
in,
Okay.
okay, in
Okay.
this context,
So,
it reminds me of Rabindranath, who offers a different notion of life writing in Jivon Sriti, where life writing is demonstrated as a loosely drawn series of visuals. My question to you, ma'am, how the authorial position in the intersectional points of class, caste, gender influences the contour of the self mediated through a life writing? This is a question that has appeared in the chat box of YouTube, the YouTube chat box.
Okay, so if you are
Point of intersectionality, I guess, the how
yes,
the point.
so
Yes.
if you want to, I mean, when we are reading autobiography, we have to, I mean, any sort of writing, including autobiography, will be placed in an intersectional kind of field where several things work together: class, caste, gender, several things work together, and uh, that actually constructs the kind of autobiography, the kind of writing that you'll write, and that in certain senses also in certain senses that would also construct the kind of textual strategies that you will be taking up, and the and if you are thinking of your life, then which as you are talking about certain visuals, I mean, so it, I mean, that intersectionality of intersectional field of class, caste, gender, and several other things that would determine like what exactly is important to you. I mean, in your whole life. I mean, in its episodical, as you are episodically kind of reflecting your own life, which episodes, which events are important, which episodes you're forgetting, which episodes you are remembering, and how you remember your life. I mean that, and the kind of textual strategies that you take up um, to explicate your memories. I mean, everything is implicated in this intersectional field of several modes of discrimination that are which are there in the society.
Thank you, ma'am. I don't think there are any more questions. So, can we move on to the vote of thanks?
Sure.
It will be
So,
delivered by Durba Mukherjee. Yes.
hello. I have been assigned the task of delivering the vote of thanks, and I utilize this opportune moment to not only thank you, but also bring about my observation a bit over here. And since you have, to the structure of the lecture, since you had begun with the concept of woman, and that reminded me definitely of Simone de Beauvoir, and how that pans out as woman as a construct rather than, you know, just there as a natural entity, and how you have charted your talk that very well builds up with the notion of how woman as a writer or an author is reconstructing that self of that social construct. So thank you, ma'am. And I would like to take this opportunity to not only thank you for delivering this really interesting and informative lecture, but I would also like to read out a student, Sampurna, I believe, who had mentioned that it had been a very enlightening session. I would also like to thank our principal, Dr. Adoshi Korpa, um, under whose patronage we are conducting this year long lecture series. And last but not the least, the organizers, the Department of English. It is a wholehearted effort on all of our parts that we are being able to conduct this lecture. And definitely the students who have had been shown continuous interest through all of these lectures in the lecture series. Thank you.
So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure being here with all of you.
Thank you so much.
Same here.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
So, Shubham, should we consider that this is the end and should we leave?